that I make with the artists, with the bands. Like some of my best friends that I've made in my life came from clients, you know what I mean? Just working with them and sharing that. It's a very vulnerable space to share your art with somebody. And when I get to be that fifth member or whatever member of the project, like you create a connection. And, you know, those records definitely mean the most to me. And I've definitely made some of my closest friends based off of being able to work together on something. You know, we're living with each other pretty much. You know, when you're spending 10 to 12 hours a day with a group of people, like they become your family. So that's amazing. And I'll always love that about engineering.
That's amazing. So when you kind of decided you're going to become like a full-time mixer, did you stop taking on production, stop taking on, you know, recording work? Like, was it like a gradual transition or an abrupt transition? Like, how did that go for you?
It was an abrupt transition. I have to say that I share my studio with 4 other producers, and further to that, my musical family, which is literally just my best friends. Like I probably have, I mean, it's too many to count, but I'm very blessed to have a great tight knit network of friends that are all either talented artists, talented producers, talented engineers. And, you know, we all help each other thrive. We all inspire each other to put our best foot forward constantly. So, there isn't really a mixer in that group, you know, and a couple of the engineers mix, but they weren't a designated mixer. They'd be producing or they'd be recording, and then they would mix it after. And everyone started to kind of focus on producing. And I'm like, okay, cool. I have all these amazing producers beside me. Like, why am I going to try and compete with them when they're all so good? And, you know, I love to mix, and my talents lie with mixing. So why don't I just work with them instead of trying to, I mean, not like you're competing, but you are competing, you know, it's like not when an artist needs to work with typically 1 or 2 producers, you know? So I just didn't feel like competing with my talented friends straight up. So I decided that, you know, mixing would be something that I could definitely improve at if I just focused on it. So at that point, when I decided, I kind of cut out like projects. Like I no longer made myself available to record albums, to record projects, to record bands. I was like, okay, I want to work on productions. I'll engineer productions because typically that's more a song by song process, and I'll still engineer vocals, but it's rare that I'll produce a full record for a band, or, you know, I still love to engineer too. So sometimes if an engineering project comes up that feels good and is inspiring, I'll definitely consider it. But I just felt that my services would be best if I catered it towards what was needed in our group. And mixing was that.
I love that.
And that was mixing. So here I've been for about 1.5 years of solely mixing. Great.
Do you find that most of your work comes through your producer friends, or do other artists find you? Like,
it's been a bit of both. A lot of the work that I do has come up through my friends one way or the other. Which is another blessing because I'm still getting to work with people who I respect, and, you know, just like I just feel like so appreciative to be a part of their art. So, and I definitely try to make relationships with producers because I feel like that's a good way to develop a workflow and kind of turn things around in an efficient manner. So yeah, I definitely started off by getting mixes from my producer friends, and I mix for a handful of them now. But from there, I've slowly started to create connections with the artists that they bring me to. And then I've gotten other work from those artists when they work with other producers or when they produce things themselves. So it's growing from that regard. But I just found like making a relationship with a producer is such a big part of being a mixer because, you know, oftentimes the producer has a good amount of say as to where the project goes after it leaves their hands. And so I've been able to make some connections and make some relationships where some of them I mix for pretty exclusively, not completely exclusively, but like most of the time, some producers just send me their stuff, and we've worked out arrangements where, you know, it just makes sense. So that's been my kind of goal to achieve with multiple people. And eventually I want to reach out to other producers outside of my network to kind of develop relationships like that as well. But I find that has been working out best for me thus far.
Yeah, I mean, I would second that. Just like being on good terms with like other people in your scene, in your city, with like the other producers, mixing engineers, whatever, is always a good thing. It's always been a good thing for me. I'm able to like refer work I can't do to my friends, and they refer work to me, and just like, you know, or like me mixing one of their productions or me helping with the production, and it could be anything, but like just kind of having a mindset of like of plenty rather than a mindset of competition is so good.
Absolutely.
And I think it's like so important to foster those relationships.
Totally. And that kind of goes to answer the question you asked earlier about like, how did I stop taking on productions? I just would, when artists would hit me up to produce, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to hook you up with this producer and then I'll mix it, you know, because that's the relationship that we have. So I've just been trying to plug my friends with work, and it works out because they're all talented in their own regard. I have an opportunity to like listen to the project and be like, okay, who would do this project the most justice? This is in this person's bag. Okay, let's introduce them, see how they vibe, and kind of go from there. So that's been cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess you mentioned to me before we started recording this episode that you've been working from home since COVID started. Are you mixing on headphones? Like, how are you working now?
I'm mixing on headphones, and Sonar Works, reference for the solution to all of my problems. So shout out Sonar Works. You guys are killing it. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. And you're just using like these AKGs that I'm seeing?
Yeah, AKG 240s. These are like super old. They're kind of falling apart, but it's been working. You know, I have a mix room down in my studio that's like treated properly, and you know, I have a couple sets of speakers, a sub, all that stuff, and that's all fun. But I don't know, like I just started doing my best work when I was mixing at home on headphones, and I don't know if that's just because of headphones, but it's made me it kind of humbled me in a way, because I used to have this mentality when I was mixing in my treated control room that we spent so much time acoustically treating to make it correct and accurate, and, you know, finding the right speakers that like, you know, feel good. Because everyone loves to sit, at least from a mixing standpoint or a producing or engineering standpoint, everyone loves to sit down at a desk and feel special about where they're sitting, and like these speakers are hitting me in such a great way. It's like inspiring to feel that movement. But I just found that that's kind of unrealistic, and I learned that from working at home, working on headphones. You know, using SonarWorks definitely helped things get a little more accurate because headphones are colored, so the SonarWorks helped correct that. But then it also forced me to start referencing more, because I got so comfortable in my control room that it'd be like, okay, cool, I know how this room sounds, so I know how it's going to translate. But now that I'm mixing on headphones, I'm referencing on 4 or 5 different sources a lot more than I would. You know, like I would always take mixes to the car every once in a while. But there would be some times where I would feel confident about what was happening out of my room, and I would send it out, and then, you know, maybe I'd listen on my drive home, or if I was stepping out for a bit, but it wouldn't be part of my process. And now it's referencing is very much reintegrated into my process, where I've got, you know, a bunch of Bluetooth speakers, a bunch of different kinds of headphones. I've got the car, and, you know, there's levels to it. You just kind of check off, okay, cool, this sounds good on Apple Buds. Okay, this sounds good on my Beats headphones. Okay, this sounds good on my little Bluetooth speaker. Okay, let's take it to the car. And after the car, it's pretty clear whether things are sitting well or whether they're not.
That's wild, man. Yeah. Do your ears get more fatigued, like more quickly, or do you find that it's not as much of an issue as you may have thought?
That's an interesting question. For a moment, they felt more fatiguing. Like when I was mixing from home originally on headphones, I'd go to bed at the end of the night and I'd kind of hear a little bit of ringing, and I'm like, okay, that's a bit of a problem. How can I correct that? So when I was mixing on speakers, I was trying to be as conscious as possible to listen at low volumes. You know, trying to sit somewhere between like the 75 dB range. You know, I had a little VU meter on my phone that I would just check to make sure that I wasn't fatiguing my ears, because it's easy to start turning it up, and the next thing you know, you're like, whoa, don't even know what I'm listening to anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, I found on headphones I was kind of listening just a little bit louder than I should have, and I don't think it's because it was overly loud, because I don't enjoy listening overly loud. Like it really doesn't do anything for me, especially because things sound better when it's louder. When you can feel the bass, it feels like it's better, but it's usually not the case. So I just had to be a little bit more mindful to trim it back. And what I found most interesting about fatiguing and just like this whole home setup and home lifestyle is that when I would go down to my studio, it's like, okay, cool. I'm going down to the studio for 8 to 10 hours a day. And, I'd wake up in the morning and try and get all my personal life things sorted so I could go down to work and not have to worry about anything for the rest of the day and just focus on mixing. But I'm finding that when I'm at home now, it's easier to take breaks. It's easier to give yourself that space. And the insight that provides, I find, is more effective than going to work and concentrating for 8 to 10 hours a day. So I think that because I'm taking breaks throughout the day, I'll probably sit down on my computer anywhere between 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. And I'm probably shutting down for the night around 1 a.m. So that's a longer day. Obviously, I'm taking breaks in between, but while I'm taking those breaks, I'm referencing and I'm just like putting things on, whatever. If I need to run out to the grocery store, I'm bringing the mix in the car with me to listen and just see where it's at. And those times of unplugging give me more perspective than if I were to just sit there and continuously work.
Yeah. The breaks are so important.
It's so important because you need to live life too. You can't just ignore life to work all the time. Like I feel like it's easier to perform as a human if you are, practicing being a human on the daily basis, especially now that it's the summer, like even just getting breaks to go outside and like get exercise and get some sunlight, those provide more benefits than one would think. At least to me, it works for me. Sometimes I'll take a break in the middle of the day and go play soccer with my friends. And when I go drive to play soccer, I'm listening to mix in the car, developing some feedback, whatever. Cool. I'll go run around, exert myself for an hour, come back into the car, listen on the way home. And by the time I get home, I know what I need to do next to the song.
Yeah.
So I find that is helpful. And when I'm sitting in the studio for 8 to 10 hours a day, I find I'm not getting that insight as much. So
you lose perspective after a while.
Definitely. So no, go
ahead.
Yeah,
those breaks seem to be probably what's like helping your fatigue. What otherwise would maybe be like headphone fatigue. You're just getting brain relaxation moments or whatever.
Yeah, I brought these. I was during the pandemic as well. Like when everyone was in isolation, I was using my Oratones as well to just like for like mix prep and kind of for moments when I didn't need to be critically listening. If I'm organizing tracks, listening to the ref. Editing stuff, I'll try and get off of headphones because I just feel like having the speakers right by your ears all the time, that's going to fatigue you throughout the day. And even just the feeling of having headphones on all day becomes fatiguing. Like on long days when I take my headphones off, I'm just like, oh, thank you. It's like, it can get taxing.
Yeah.
So
not as bad as a mask though.
No, not as bad as a mask. No doubt. Shout out to the people who are working with masks on. When I'm running sessions, I'm straight up starting to do sessions again in my studio, doing vocal sessions here and there, and I'm wearing a mask while I'm doing that. And it's not as comfortable. I will say that it's hard to. Sometimes it's just distracting. But yeah, so I try and listen through different methods. I want to get another small set of speakers at home to use. I brought my Oratones back down to the studio now because now I'm starting to do like mix revision sessions with clients in studio. Like some clients just like to be in the room to finalize it. So if they're in town, then it works out. So I've brought my points of reference down there and I've just been using headphones and just my other reference sources at home. But I do want to invest into another pair of small speakers, maybe some like iLouds or another set of Oratones or something like that. Yeah. iLouds are amazing. Yeah. Man. They sound so good.
Yeah. And it's good to just also maybe like, I mean, for me, we have like a stereo system in our living room, and it's just kind of like nice for me to kind of step out there and maybe listen there. And even though it's not treated like my studio is, it just gives me a feeling for what it sounds like in a room,
Yeah,
and that is helpful just to have like speakers,
Absolutely. I mean, like the amount of people who aren't going to be listening in a treated room is way more likely than the audiophiles who have studios or who like
right they're which is very very few and far between.
Yeah, exactly. So that's definitely important.
Yeah, another thing that I was thinking about when you were talking about like how you're referencing and you're taking breaks and stuff is like I find that like if you can find that right like hour and a half 2 hours of the day where you just are like most creatively like there, and you could just kind of sit down and like get like the bulk of a mix going in those 2 hours, and then afterwards you take a break and you reference and you think about the little tweaks and stuff. Like those 2 hours can be like the most important 2 hours of a mix.
Definitely.
It's just like it's just about knowing what time of day that is for you, where you're like most alert, most creative, and you could just kind of like get in and like just like attack for like a tiny amount of time.
Totally.